Okie dokie. All right. Well, hello everyone. How are we doing? I can't see anybody. I can just see our presentation and I can see the lovely organizers at Luminary and I can see my co-host Dr. Tanya. So I'm going to kickstart the presentation. I already kickstarted a mini presentation by showing you a little urn, a little sneak preview, which just happened to be in the background there. But yeah, myself and Dr. Tanya are going to be giving you a little bit of an insight into end of life planning for the LGBTQ plus community. And while we're going to be showing a few slides, I really want this to be an open presentation. So please, 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 shout out your comments, put up your hand, send us a message, however you want to communicate the message to us. I can't see anybody, but I feel like Tanya can. But either way, we will figure it out and get your messages to us. So I guess without further ado, I just want to get started with a who are we? All right, well, that's usually the first slide in every presentation. And I know I can speak for Tanya and myself when say we're here to help. That's who we are. We're here to help in however we can help you make decisions, answer questions, anything like that. I will let Tanya tell about her fabulous self. But for me, myself, I'm from Ireland. You may pick up a small accent there. My nickname is the Glam Reaper, lovingly given to me by the British media. As I always joke, it's the one good thing the Brits did for Ireland. But I started my company 18 years ago now in Ireland, and it was a funeral planning company. I'm not a funeral director. I'm very clear about that. And so I will always have a funeral director and an expert with me answering any of these questions. I am two things, a celebrant and a funeral planner. So a funeral planner is like a wedding planner, but for funerals, and a celebrant is like a priest, but not a priest. Those are the two services we offer under Muldowney Memorials, which is the company that I started. And you will also see there's another little very pride focused logo in there too, which is Rainbow Bridge Memorials, because we also do everything we do for humans, we do for our furry pet family as well. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I mean, I could go on and on, things, but I really want to focus on what we're here to do today, which is we're here to help. Tanya, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, please?
Yes, yes, of course, Jennifer. So, first of all, I want to thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this most, just necessary, let's use the word necessary conversation today. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Tanya Scotece. I do see we have some students from Miami-Dade College on the call. Most students know me as Dr. T, but in an informal setting, please feel free to call me Tanya. I have been in the funeral profession as a director and embalmer for 22 years. And I was in industry, working every day at a funeral home. Started actually in Connecticut, so anybody from New England area, and made my transition into Florida back in 2005. And I was at the funeral home on the west coast of Florida, in Venice specifically, and had, all kinds of families that we served. And I just continued in school once I received my Associate of Science in Mortuary Science. And I hold a PhD in Curriculum and Instruction for Adult Education Learners. And I have a cognate in Medical Legal Death Investigation and Evaluation. So both on the forensic side and funeral side. I currently oversee the program at Miami-Dade College here in Miami, Florida. We offer two programs there. I'll enlighten for those of you that maybe want to continue on for education. We offer the Associate of Science, which is what is really required nationally in most states. So an Associate of Science, 72 credit hours usually can get you there. We offer the college credit certificate in Florida. Some states call it something different, like a technical certificate, and that would be for funeral director only. So if anyone is interested, maybe you have friends, colleagues, family members wanting to know a little bit more, by all means, put it in the chat and we'll be happy to get any questions answered. So back to you, Jennifer. And again, I'm super excited for this collaboration, and I'm super excited to hear from our guests to see what questions, might come out of this conversation.
Thank you, Tanya. All right, let's get started. So the one thing I wanted to just talk about real quick was the big question here is, what if the most personal event of your life is the one you're least likely to plan? Now, I am a former wedding planner, party planner. We do birthdays, we do baby showers, bar mitzvahs, weddings, I mean, divorce parties. We celebrate life, its ups and its downs in all these different varieties. And yet, what I could not understand 18 years ago in Ireland when two friends of mine died was how little and how, um, I don't want to say poor planning, but how just little we talk about funerals, how little we talk about our final farewell party. And that all led me to writing my first book called Say Farewell Your Way, which is what I have emphasized for the last 18 years and continue to say to this day. Every single one of us is unique. And so, why are we going through the same motions? For me, my experience was I found myself in a church. A friend of mine had passed away and he was atheist. And why were we sitting in a church? None of it made sense to me. And so that was what sort of started me on this journey. So I really, really want the goal for everyone who is at this and everyone watches the recording and anybody who comes across this in any way, shape, or form, or even comes to any of my workshops or just interacts with me whatsoever. I'm just off a 2 month trip around Europe where I was investigating death care culture. And I really genuinely just hope that when people walk away from a conversation with me, that they walk away armed with maybe a little bit of extra information that they never had, and hopefully putting some notes into a pre-plan. Now, we will get at the very end, I will put all of this together for you. But even if you tonight at the dinner table turn around to somebody and say, do you want to be buried or cremated? And we'll get to a bit that later. But even just opening that question, and I know it sounds like a crazy question, and yes, we can talk about ways to start that conversation for sure. But I really, really just want you to open your minds and just open your hearts and put in whether it's you or for a loved one to start doing some pre-planning. So that's really the goal for this whole thing. um you're going to hear the same. I'm going to just reiterate the same things over and over again. My TEDx talk is actually even about this. We are so unique. Our heartbeats are unique. There are so many parts of us that are just quintessentially us. No one else will experience our lives the same in the world. No one is going to be sitting in this moment having the same thoughts ever, ever again in history. And it's never going to happen again in future history, right? So our identity deserves to have its final chapter. It deserves to, our whole life deserves to be shared, to be incorporated into our farewell, right? I always bring it back to I'm Irish, I was raised Catholic, okay? I still identify as Catholic. But that does not mean that I am going to automatically have my funeral in a church. It does not mean that I automatically want it presided over by a priest. I personally want songs, I want music, I want it in a beautiful venue. I want my friends to actually officiate it. I do want some prayers said, yes. But my being Catholic is only it's only 5% of who I am. The other 95% is crazy Jen who travels the world, who, has moved from New York to Florida, still half in New York, always running around with a suitcase, usually a martini in hand too. I want all of the parts of me to be incorporated into my funeral. And I don't want what typically does seem to happen, which is the same cookie cutter, the same funerals. We go through the motions because we're grieving, because we have this blueprint that traditionally has always been there. This is not to say, and no word that comes out of my mouth is ever to say that tradition is bad or religion is bad. Absolutely not. I just told you I identify as Catholic. I consider it like 5% of my personality just because I don't really go to church, but I believe in a higher being. I believe in all these things. I also believe that tradition can be beautiful. It absolutely can be beautiful. This is not to poo-poo the way we have done it before. It is just about being more diverse, being more inclusive, and opening up our hearts and our minds and the funeral book to different things, to different ideas, different venues, different inclusions. And again, we're going to come through all of this, but at the end of the day, grief is what typically engulfs us when we've lost the person we loved. So, pre-planning your own funeral allows your loved ones to plan out your funeral while looking after themselves, while grieving, because at the end of the day, that's if they're your friends, they're your family, they're going to be absolutely bereft having lost you, okay? And so to have your pre-plan done, and I'll use an example of my own mother. I've used this example so many times, but I sat down, me and my mom are mother and daughter, but we're also best friends. And so I thought I knew this woman inside and out. And I sat down with a pre-plan, a document that I'll share with everybody at the end, but I sat down and did a pre-plan with her. And I realized this is not just my mother. She's also my brother's mother. She's a grandmother. She's a wife. She's a daughter. She's the lady who goes to the doctor's office. She's the lady who goes to the supermarket and bargains for things. She's so many more, so much more than just my mother. And yet, I know when she passes, it will be left to me to organize her funeral. And so I would have done it my way because I wouldn't have known her wishes if we had never had this conversation. So, for example, I would have had Wind Beneath My Wings played as the song. And when I told her this, she was aghast. Right. And I was like, but why? You are the wind beneath my wings, though. And she was like, yeah, but that's not exactly the what I want for my funeral. And so I asked her what she wants, and she wants Rod Stewart's Maggie May. Now her name's not Maggie and it's not May, so I was very confused at this. But she loves this song, and she knew her girlfriends would enjoy this, and that this would be something that they would all feel. And so how beautiful is that that you can have something in your service that really hits home, that resonates with the community that's there, because that's the thing. At your funeral, your community is coming. They're coming to support, yes, the immediate next of kin, but they're also coming to go and start their own grieving process. And so it's about your funeral, I feel, should encompass all of that. And nobody should become invisible after someone dies. And I'm sure Tanya is going to talk about some of her own experiences with this, but I have sat in on arrangements where there has been no pre-plan, and unfortunately there has been no sort of legal documentation made. And the person who has passed was born male but identified as female his entire life, her entire life. And but the mother was sitting there and she was like, I'm burying my son. And so she had legal right to do as she wished. And it was a really difficult arrangement to sit in on because we want to defend the person who was passed and identify their wishes. But at the same time, you're stuck in a legal predicament. Now, I don't deal with an awful lot of that because I'm not a funeral director, as I've said. And so it is my job to, in the memorial, encompass and include as many people as we can physically possibly do. And I will touch a bit more on that as we get further into the presentation. But it is so, so, so important to talk about these issues with your family, with your friends, to identify next of kin, to identify somebody legal. Because at the end of the day, this is Pride Month, but at the end of the day, it is all about living your most authentic life, okay? But also not having your identity erased after you're gone. Because and this quote, perhaps the greatest fear isn't death itself, it's having your identity erased after you're gone. I don't know what your fears are. I don't know I only know what my fears are, okay? Fears are something I think we keep quite privately, but I know when I've sat in on these arrangements, my heart has broken twice. Broken for this family who have lost this young person, and broken again because now this person's identity that they chose in life is now being erased after they're gone. So it's small things like a chosen name or your pronouns being respected. And having the funeral home and funeral director respecting that also. A partner or a spouse being minimized or excluded. I've dealt with many, many unfortunately moments of this. A service that ignores an important part of someone's identity. I experienced that 18 years ago when I was sitting in a church for my friend who was atheist. Photos, stories, or relationships being omitted or downplayed can often be a massive issue. We do a monthly newsletter at Muldowney Memorials, and I always include a sort of a letter from me, a love letter, I call it, from me. And I talked about living out loud. Now, I'm a straight white woman, Irish, living in America. But what I really realized traveling was how little we listen to people, and how we're often nearly ready to talk before we have heard what the other person is actually saying to us. And I also got to realize, like living out loud, it just sounds like such a, and I'm not a quiet person. You can probably already tell from even virtually, that I'm not afraid to public speak. I'm not afraid for my opinion to be heard. I'm not afraid but it's not necessarily about being loud. It can actually be quiet. You can actually live out loud in quiet. It's about asserting yourself. It's about having boundaries. It's about having your wishes respected. And so, our entire newsletter this month was really about this topic. And just genuinely, my entire ethos in the business is about how we live authentically, or we should be at least trying to live authentically. And so, therefore, we should be able to say farewell in an authentic way as well. Um, there's lots more. I just want to give Tanya, do you want to pop in for a little bit? There's loads more slides, or do you want me to do you want to come in with a little?
Sure, sure. So, no, I really appreciate the conversation that you started us with, Jen, because, even just identifying, for example, like your mom, right? You know your mom in a certain way because she's your mom, but that's just a piece of who she is, right? She's,
Yeah.
somebody else's mom. She's a friend. She may be in her community. So I want everyone here, and I know we have, I'm so excited. I have some students I haven't seen in quite some time. So super excited to see the Miami-Dade College alumni here. But wherever you are today, I just want you to think about this. And as Jen, preluded the conversation to, what is it that you want, for example, for your own body, right? For your own disposition. And I think as a funeral director, I like to start there with families, because if we can kind of get that conversation rolling, we all have unique differences and preferences. Okay. So for example, for me,
100%.
I like to present it in ABC, right? So choices for all of us are anatomical donation, if you want to donate your body to science, and that is state specific. What I mean by that is different states have different types of programs. Okay, so most states have one with the universities, meaning that if you donate your body, your whole body, to a university program, that body, cadaver as we like to call it if it's donated to science, is used for a period, sometimes 12 to 24-month time frame. Most programs, at the conclusion of that 24 months, the body, whatever is remaining, is cremated. Okay, and the family can get back the actual cremated remains if they so choose, or most programs have it to where you can actually have the cremated remains scattered at sea, depending on the specific program. So I think in most funeral homes, and I speak from experience, many people leave the A out. Many people are just going by the B for burial or C for cremation. So I really want to spend a few minutes more talking about my favorite topic. That's what I want to happen. My daughter, she's going to be 33 years old this year. This is what she wants. My grandma was donated, and my grandma's brother. And that is Florida Gulf Coast University here in Fort Myers, Florida. It's an osteology program, completely different than the program that I just went over. So you're not used for medical research. You're actually used for professional studies on the forensic side. What do I mean by that? Well, when we all hear that there's a body that was buried, right? And they discover, then they're trying to identify, is it human? Is it animal? What's the ethnicity? What's the age? What's the stature of this individual? So folks who donate to Florida Gulf Coast University have the privilege of allowing students to identify however we are, learn, and kind of keep that conversation going. So wherever you are zooming in from, think about this. Would you consider anatomical donation as a final disposition? So for me, the answer is yes. I'm claustrophobic and afraid of fire. So for me, I have no desire to be cremated or buried. I like the osteology program. All 206 bones will reside in a box, and I can tell my story for future professional study students. A lot of folks are more traditional, okay? Nothing wrong with that. We talk about offering burial as an option. many different types of burial. Okay, there's burial in the ground, there's burial entombment, which is above ground. Some states have burial at sea. There's also, when we talk about, and we'll get into it a little bit further, as far as the legalities with it. Okay, so body burial, whole body burial, can be done depending on the cemetery, because it's cemetery specific, with a casket, without a casket, with a vault, without a vault, with a marker, without a marker. So we hear the word in the education realm as far as green burial, right? Going green. And I always like to give kudos to my friend Elizabeth Fournier, the Green Reaper out in Boring, Oregon, who says there are many shades of green. Okay, so wherever you are sitting today, I want you really to think about that. Like, for example, one thing is certain. No one gets out of this world alive as of yet, right? So we have choices to what we may prefer for ourselves. And a lot of times, I bet you may have it in your head, but does your quote unquote authorized representative or next of kin know your wishes, right? Or you may end up like Jennifer with her mom thinking like, oh, I want to play, A Wind Beneath My Wings. And the mom is like, no, I wouldn't have been happy with that song. So think about it even from a disposition side of things. So anatomical donation, meaning whole body donation to science. I want to touch on organ donation because many states, if you have a driver's license, you usually get asked, do you want to be an organ donor? That does not mean you are donating your body to science. That means at the time of your passing, if your organs, right, all the organs that are viable, if they're suitable for the word procurement, that means that, they could take, for example, your heart, your lungs, your corneas. They even go as invasive as skin donation, long bone donation. If you think about it, why? Because many people in their life are in need of organs or transfers. For example, burn victims, okay? People who experience major fires, they usually do skin grafting. So many things can go under the organ donation, which is different from anatomical donation, okay? Cremation nationally is on the rise. It has been for many years now. I want to touch on it because, again, many misconceptions with regards to cremation. So there's actually two different types of cremation. Cremation by flame is what we traditionally think of, cremation by fire. Some countries still do what they call the open pyre, Pyre, like for example in India, on the Ganges River, you will still see bodies on the pyre. A lot of the Asian countries will also have open pyre cremations. Here in the United States, cremation, as I mentioned, by flame is on the rise. However, I want to go back to what Jennifer said about religion. There are religions that actually prohibit cremation, and there are other religions that actually promote cremation. So it's a spectrum when we talk about cremation. Now, cremation by water is another newer type of cremation. It's called alkaline hydrolysis or watermation, aquamation are the terms. The reason most of my students love it, that's like their hot topic, but the reason that most funeral homes, even in Florida, if they tried it, usually they're selling the machine. One is it's costly, more costly than flame cremation, and it takes longer. So these are some conversations, again, wherever you're sitting. Some of you may be just, interested in just hearing more about actually like community and inclusion, but I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of the choices that we all have for us. So another type of disposition is natural organic reduction. Another word is human composting. Some states, especially out west in the United States, it's more quote unquote popular. Okay, so many different pockets of the United States offer different things based on their laws and their legalities. But one thing I want to stop for a minute and kind of educate everyone on is wherever you're living. Okay, so let's say tonight over dinner, maybe the 2 martinis that Jen says, and you discuss with your housemates, what is it that I want, right? What do I want for myself after thinking about these options? And then you dive deeper. For example, prior to any of these choices, do I want a wake or visitation or calling hours? You can call it whatever you want, meaning that people come see you, right? Who do you want to see you? Do you want it just to be your next of kin? Do you want it to be your immediate family? Do you want it to be open to the public? So you can still have all of these choices, but have a quote unquote wake or visitation if you so choose. It's so many misconceptions, again, especially with cremation. Some families think if their loved one is cremated, that's it, they're never going to see him again, which is not correct. So I think just having the conversation with the choices for final disposition. Now let me expand on a little bit more. So my preference personally is Florida Gulf Coast University. It's an osteology study. You reside in a box, all your bones. You can put your picture of what you look like. You can actually tell your story. And all of that is contained in a box. Funny story, my grandma passed. She was almost 96 years old. And that woman was busy from the time she was born, okay? Busy, busy, busy. Well, this woman is busy in death, okay? And what do I mean by that? My professor, when I was studying forensics, is the one that introduced me to her program at Florida Gulf Coast University. I would actually go see my grandma, okay? All of her bones laid out on black velvet, draped beautifully, every time I had a family that chose this type of disposition while I was working in the industry. So I said my grandma likes to be busy. A few times I would call Dr. Heather. I'd say, Dr. Heather, I have a family coming for donation. Can I visit my grandma, Grandma Angie? Tanya, your grandmother is not here this week. She's on tour. On tour? What do you mean she's on tour? Well, they had a library circuit tour showing bones to kids, okay? High school kids, grammar school, elementary school kids. And my grandma had severe osteo and rheumatoid arthritis, and it showed up in her bones. So I'll never forget one of the tours she came back on. Dr. Heather called me and she says, Tanya, you're not going to believe this. 2 kids in the class said, boy, I better start drinking milk or something. I don't want my bones to look like that when I pass. So what I'm saying is there's many options for people that go beyond just burial or just cremation. Cremation, as we saw the urn in Jennifer's background, which looks beautiful with the turtle, many options for cremation, okay? You can think of cremation, it's beautiful. Do you want the urn to reside at home? Do you want the urn to be buried like a casket? Do you want it to be put in a wall? Do you want to be scattered at sea? Do you want to turn yourself into tattoos or jewelry? So there's many things you can do, but you don't have to do all of it. For example, you can scatter some, keep some, make some keepsakes, keep some at home. So there's many different choices depending on what you personally choose. So, any thoughts on that, Jen?
No, well, I think you've clarified quite a lot there. As Dr. T said, your voice, your choice, get knowledgeable. Hopefully this is, it's a tiny little bit. I mean, we're squishing a lot into an hour and I really want to leave a lot of time for Q&A. But your disposition, anatomical donation, burial, cremation, dissolution, earth, we have it in the A, B, C, D, E. We've expanded upon it there, and we're available for more questions on all of that. I've personally experienced all of them in various different formats, and there's good in all of them. There's no bad choice in this, really. I know there's a lot of fighting in amongst industry professionals about which is the most environmentally friendly and all of that sort of jazz, but there really is, it's your choice. I'm just going to go back to one slide here, which is, every family looks different. You can have a legal family, a chosen family, a blended family, a found family. And so, one of the things I want you to try and clarify on is who speaks for you. Who's going to speak for you? Who is your community? How do they show up for you? How will they show up for your friends and your family, or your chosen or legal or blended family, or however, when the time comes? How do you want them to show up? Maybe it's a spouse who's going to be your decision maker. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's an adult child. Maybe it's a chosen family. I mean, and I know Dr. Tanya is going to talk a little bit on this, but like, for example, I'm Irish. I'm living here now. I have a home in Florida. I am also up in New York. I am childless. I'm spouseless. All chosen, by the way. But what will happen if something happens to me? Like, who's going to make some decisions over here? So all of this I've had to consider. So I've gone through a lot of it. And so it's just something I really want you guys to consider. As I said, we are, under a time crunch in terms of trying to get all this done in an hour, but hopefully this hour just opens up questions for you. So we've gone through the dispositions. This is the 3 levels of planning that are really important. Again, coming from a country, we don't have states. So there is only Ireland and there is only rules in Ireland. And even funeral homes are not legally bound per se. You don't need a license to be a funeral director or to operate a funeral home in Ireland. So we're a little wishy-washy on certain things. But at the same time, we're not, because the Catholic Church pretty much try to rule as much as they physically can in Ireland. So this was an eye-opener for me when I moved over here about 13, 14 years ago. And for me, this is super important because I am based between 2 different states and I am international. So what happens to me when I'm here? What happens to me if I, for example, was just traveling in Europe for the last 2 months? What is each state? The death certificates, the disposition laws, we've kind of touched on a bit of that. So we're not going to go back into too much of that. But, there is laws per state. So a lot of you are probably tuning in from New York, and maybe some of you are tuning in from Florida. Or maybe since this is virtual, it could be worldwide even, but it's definitely national. So there are federal laws and things that you have to take into consideration. There's the FTC, the funeral rule, which I'll let Dr. T talk a little bit about. But all of these things are super important. One of the things that I have been crystal clear on in all of my documents is the repatriation of my remains. I have told all my loved ones, if you want to see me, fly first class from Ireland. I do not want you spending the money flying my body home to Ireland for any sort of a wake or visitation. I've been very clear on that. In fact, I don't really want a wake or a visitation at all. But if my mother needs to physically see me in order to process, then that's okay with me. So making all of these plans are just small, tiny things that you can do to help your family and your friends when the time comes, because it's not if, as Tanya mentioned earlier, so far none of us are getting out of this alive, unfortunately. Tanya, do you want to give us we're tight enough on time, so do you want to give us a little 2-minute on this maybe?
Sure. So, as Jen mentioned, when we think of different states in the United States, so we have our state specific. That's kind of like what happens in Florida or New York or wherever state you're living in. Now, the minute you pass in another state, that state is the one that's filing your death certificate. Okay, so even if you've lived your whole life in New York, you travel to Florida on vacation, you pass there, now your death certificate is being filed in the state where you passed. Some things that I want to bring in a little bit closer to the topic of the LGBTQ is the forms. Okay, we have state forms, there's forms in funeral service. And I was having a beautiful conversation with my god sister who's on the call this morning. And we talked about, for example, if you are in a same-sex relationship, a lot of the state forms say, for example, mother and father. Okay. And in my opinion, I would actually like to take this to the Florida legislature to have them actually reconsider using the word parent, because this way no one is crossing anything out. No one is feeling that their way is incorrect or even wrong. So these are things that have been historically pretty much standard in the funeral profession. Those of you that are coming from school or former graduates and alumni, we know that the funeral profession is one of the oldest professions out there. So I just want to actually bring that I want to be the voice. I want to make the changes that are necessary. So instead of having documents that read gender specific or something that people feel like, why can't it just say something a little bit more generic just as far as parent, right? Whoever the parent is, two moms, two dads. I think that that would even work very nicely on death certificates because it's the same conversation. The national is everything happens in the United States. So currently, your body does not have to be embalmed to go from one state to the other. Your family can actually pick you up and drive you across state lines if they choose and they have a vehicle to do so. Or we can fly your body. So if you fly, you can go in a casket or without a casket. The choice is yours depending on where you go. And international, as Jen mentioned, we have a lot of folks that are residing in the United States that want to go back to either their country of origin or maybe they want to just go somewhere that they've never been. Okay, that's also an option. That international is the same as us saying we want to go to, let's say, Nigeria. We would have to look into what are the regulations to get into the country. It is the same conversation with the decedent. So again, walking away from the conversation, state specific is what happens in that state. Most of the time it has to do with timelines. For example, for like a cremation, how long is the waiting period if there is one? Some states don't even have a waiting period. You can die in the morning, get cremated the same day. National, again, there are no laws. There are religions that prohibit embalming. So if you don't get embalmed, they literally pack you with gel packs so the body remains cool while it's being in transit. Years ago, we used to use dry ice, and then TSA did away with that. International is just the same thing about passport and customs. We talk to the embassy or consulate of the country, and that's how that is, that's how that is kind of laid out. So back to you, Jen.
All right. So I wanted to bring a little lightness into some of you are mortuary students and some of you are this is your first time even maybe coming to one of my workshops or one of my talks with Luminary. And if you've been to one of my talks with Luminary before, you know I try to keep it light. It is a heavy subject. You might be dealing with grief currently. You might be dealing with the potential upcoming loss of somebody. So again, I want to reiterate that myself and Tanya are both here for you in however way we can. But these are just some images of services we've done in the past. There's an urn, a beautiful wooden urn, and then these are just some different ways that people have chosen to celebrate the life and mourn the loss of their loved one. So whether it's, incorporating jazz music, incorporating a sort of an altar, making it very prideful, a little Alice in Wonderland fun, or a playbill, or having something outdoors, and these are just a tiny example of ones that we have done in the past. It can be as elaborate as you want. It can be as expensive as you want. I have done services for up to $1 million. I'm not suggesting that anybody has that pocket change, but I'm just letting you know that people are deadly serious about celebrating life and mourning a loss. And why shouldn't we? Because we put all of this money and this planning and this time and effort into planning a wedding, and you could be divorced a year later. And so for me, I think your final farewell, your final chapter in this world should go out with a bang, or at least it should very go out as you came into the world and as you have lived in this world. So whatever that is for you, whether your favorite color is yellow, whether you love going to theater, whether you want your final ashes to be kept in a beautiful handmade wooden ark, or as I keep you swear I'm doing like a promo, or if you'd like your ashes put in a biodegradable turtle and put out into the Florida Ocean, or whichever ocean or you want, and say farewell that way. So there's lots of different options, lots of different ways to celebrate a life. For me, and with any of my clients, the most important thing is, yes, we are celebrating a life, but we also have to mourn the loss. And I refuse to work with families who they only want a party. And I have this honest conversation with families where they're like, but he lived a full color in life, and it has to be the life and soul of the party. It has to be this and that and the other. Yes, 100%. We will celebrate his life, but we also have to be cognizant of the fact that people are grieving, that there is an empty seat at the bar, at the dinner table, at the boardroom, wherever it is this person lived. There is now a hole. And I refuse to just have everything be positive and brushing over grief, because that is not helpful at all. And every family I've worked with, and we've worked through this, has come back in gratitude, and thank God we have nothing but 5-star reviews thus far. And sometimes it can be having two different spaces. Like for example, that playbill, that extra colorful one that you're seeing right there, we actually had two different spaces. We had the service in a pure white, black and white, photos only, serene, beautiful service, incredibly personalized and just beautiful. And then afterwards we went into this other room that had all this color, that had all this vivaciousness, that had all this life. But guess what? There were some people who remained behind in the room where it was just black and white because they weren't ready to color their lives again. They weren't ready. And so we have to meet people where they're at, as opposed to be forcing this specific narrative on them, right? So we're 15 minutes out. I did want to leave some time for Q&A. All I can tell you is planning is one of the greatest gifts you can leave your loved ones. Please do say farewell your way, not my way, not Tanya's way, not anybody else's way. Pre-planning reduces guesswork for your families. It eases the burden, sometimes financially, depending on what you do about that. You can protect your identity, you reduce conflict, you're giving clear guidance, you're encouraging important conversations that can keep filtering through. Thank you. But you're making informed financial decisions, and you're leaving love, not uncertainty. That's really what it all comes down to. And just on the finances part of it, we didn't touch on it. Again, there's too much to try and cover in this 1 hour. But you are entitled to ring any funeral home and get their pricing. So that is, you should never be denied any information about anything. So pre-planning also helps in terms of that. When we don't plan, someone else is going to write your final chapter, and we don't want that. So I do want to open up for Q&A. These are just two documents I have used in the past. One of them is my simple 5 questions, because it doesn't overwhelm people. I can happily send this to everybody. We start with that. And what I love is the opening question. What method of disposition would you like, burial, cremation, or other? And I don't know how many workshops I have done in Luminary where everyone immediately goes, what do you mean other? And as you heard Dr. T talking about, there are so many other options. So be curious, lean into curiosity, find out more, and make your decision. And just make it from an educational point of view. Make it that you know what you're talking about. When you're ready with those 5 questions and you feel like you're ready to launch into the next one, I have a plan. It is 40 plus pages. You go through it, you'll have pre-planned your own funeral, give it to your loved one. It's not legally binding or anything like that. It's not a will, but give it to your loved one, share your wishes with people, share it with your local funeral home or whoever you want to do your services. We do have another document we're working on at the moment, which is lovingly entitled Getting Your Shit Together. So it's to sort of incorporate a little bit more of the legal aspect. But that's really it. Dr. T, do you want to end with anything before we go to Q&A?
Sure. Just a last minute thought here. As Jen mentioned, everyone has a way that we want to be remembered, and some of you may have this thought in your head more so than others. So as when you resume your normal life today, maybe tonight over dinner, or over the next few days, with the holiday celebration here for America's birthday, think about it. Even if you want your cremated remains going up into a fireworks, that's another company that does that here in the United States. So fireworks is an option. Going into space as an astronaut, Memorial Celebrities is one of the companies that does that. But I just think to have someone else dictate what is right for you is actually incorrect or wrong. So I think we all have choices. We can, use Jen's planner here and, have it that somebody knows where it is. I'll just touch real quick, Jen, on pre-planning with funeral homes. It is not necessary to go to a funeral home and prepay. Some families like to, especially if somebody's going on Medicaid. Usually that is a requirement. So that is usually one of the number one reasons folks actually pre-plan. Some, they just want to make sure everything is done. But again, remember, you may not die in the state. So there have very cohesive agreements with funeral homes as far as getting the body back to its respective state if that's the way that the family wants. So the conversation goes well beyond today, but I just want to, it's kind of like, have it your way, how you identify, how you want to be remembered. If you love the color purple and you want everybody to wear purple, then make sure it's known, because otherwise, they all may show up in black. So, okay, Jen, back to you.
Yep, that's it. Oh my God, that's fabulous. Thank you very much, guys. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so I can hopefully see some people. But yeah, we are open to questions. Please, please, please give us your questions. There any in the chats? Oh my gosh, I thought we'd have loads of questions.
Miss Taylor. Hello, Miss Taylor.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, really.
Good
Hi,
afternoon. How are you? How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys doing this
So
day?
good to see you. We're so happy you
Great.
joined us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. My question is for Miss Jennifer. What is a piece of advice you would give yourself starting out instead of going into the funeral industry and starting your business that you have now?
So the question is, going into, okay, so starting a funeral profession, a funeral career.
Yes.
Okay, what would be my first step? Oof. Oh gosh. Well, probably not to do the way I did it. Because there was a lot of sort of feeling around in the dark. And honestly, when I started, it was in Ireland and there was really no resources available. Actually, it's what led me to write my first book, was I just felt like, oh my God, there's no information. Everything was in the UK and the US, no information I could find whatsoever. So thankfully that has changed and I like to think I started a little bit of it. If I was starting today, honestly, and I recommend this to, I consult with so many different companies, people who want to do what I do, who want to be a celebrant, who want to be a funeral director, who are interested in tech, who are interested in AI, all of the different varieties there are now. I still would recommend, whether you're planning on ever working in a funeral home or being a funeral director or not, I would still recommend interning in a funeral home, honestly, as much as possible, whether it's just answering the phones or it just gives you such an eye-opening view of what this profession actually entails. And I think it does nothing but give you more to work from then, depending on what, I mean, there's so many different, like, I train celebrants. You can do courses, like you could train to be a death doula. I personally am not trained, nor am I a death doula. But you could do a celebrant course. That's one thing I am and do. We are going to be releasing a memorial planning course as well. But there are loads of little courses you can do. But for me, I think education only takes us so far. I think real life, real world experience is irreplaceable. I think, yeah, get the education, absolutely, but getting out there and just getting your hands dirty, maybe not literally, but getting your hands dirty is really the easiest way to see if it's for you. Because it's a lot of people I feel like come into this, and I know a lot of people who have trained as death doulas and they've never actually seen a body or they've never experienced anything funereal at all. And I don't think that's helpful because how can you help somebody go through grief if you have not stood with somebody or experienced that too? And I do think it comes with, you get seasoned at it, right? Like I've been doing this for 18 years. There's things I can never train somebody to do because it just comes from experience and living in this career, I think. So yeah, I don't know. Hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Hi,
Nadia, hello.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
I can't complain. I actually don't have a question. Hi, Professor.
Okay.
I actually more so I came in a little late, but this was very informative. Um, I'm picking up on more things that I didn't really associate with, that you can make it work. For instance, I'm glad you mentioned the death doula because my partner is a Reiki practitioner. And for a while, she's been saying, you have certain little gifts that, little clairvoyant things that she was like, listen, this can be perfect. You may not necessarily have to go down the road that you envision, but I'm glad that you mentioned that because it just kind of pretty much showed me that it's not this little box that we kind of lean towards and think it is. it's way
Yeah.
bigger than, so thank you for the information.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's so much, and actually for people on this call who are not in education or training or in any or have any knowledge of the funeral space at all, there are so many different options in this, and a death doula is, just for clarity on it for everyone, is similar to a birth doula. So somebody who's there to help the grieving family, but also help the dying person and then deceased person, and they're sort of in the background as a non-medical support for the dying, the deceased. And there are different varieties of death doulas, and then again, that's something to look into if it's something that, for example, as I said, I don't have a partner, I don't have a child, I'm living by myself. Maybe a death doula might be something that, especially if I was in hospice care or dying, then it might be something I might have because I don't have somebody who is here to support. So it's definitely an option for a lot of people to have that extra support. Thank you for that. Is there any other questions? Anybody else? Let me see who else we have. Right.
Jen, I want to add
Luminary,
something.
if
Yeah.
anything's come in. Yeah.
I just want to add something for our listeners today is in the United States, there's very little that you actually have to go to school for to become a director. For example, you could all work in a funeral home as an attendant or an assistant. You could work at a cemetery. You could work as an apprentice. You could help out. You could do any clerical. You could pick up and transfer decedents from where they pass to the funeral home. So when people say, like, you can even do makeup. Most states you don't have to be a licensed embalmer to do makeup. So there's many things in the death care space, which is what I think that our mission is today for all of you, is to literally think beyond just traditional and think of all the different things. And I want to close my section out with this. In the funeral profession, okay, it's one of these where religion dictates a lot, culture dictates a lot. Okay, so it is still standard if you own an African American funeral home and you are serving African American families, you can actually publicize that. Okay, doesn't mean that that funeral home will not serve other ethnicities, but that is their target. I would also encourage all of you to think about, our topic for Pride Month is LGBTQ. Some of you may be sitting here, why aren't we doing more by voicing that in the profession? Some of you may also be sitting here saying, no, we don't want it voiced. We want to be able to, be served wherever we choose. So these conversations go well beyond the hour that we have allotted for you. But I would welcome, thoughts for future discussion to say maybe some of you want to make a difference, right, within this community, to say, what, there's so much we could do. So that's my 2 cents collaboration. So I think we have a hand up from Miss Jessica.
We do.
Jessica, you're muted. Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm also simultaneously
That's okay.
working and listening to this.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I do that all the time,
It
Jessica.
popped up on my calendar this morning. I'm like, oh, I'm not missing one. So I do identify as an end-of-life educator. I do have a lot of certifications, but right now in my community and with my business, education, community talks, tabling at vendor events, is kind of what I'm doing. And I'm recently on the board of directors for the Funeral Consumer Alliance in upstate New York here. And I'm wondering, I have a lot of experience in funerals and things like that in terms of my family, but I'm also looking to get more of an inside look with funerals and funeral homes, but like in a non-threatening way. Just I want to educate myself more so I could, educate my folks. And, I realize sometimes in certain areas there can be kind of the tension, right, between the funeral homes and the educators. And so I'm trying to figure out what my next step should be. So maybe if Jennifer or Tanya has any advice there.
Go ahead, Jen. You want to start?
No, you can go first.
Okay.
Go first.
So Jessica, very insightful question. So I would say, the main thing is to really build the relationship first. Okay. So instead of walking in off the street to, ABC Funeral Home saying, hey, I would like to learn more and there's ways to do that. Most funeral homes are part of chambers. You mentioned you serve on different, committees and things. I would build those relationships first. And most funeral home managers or owners would be able to sit down with you and maybe to actually clarify what maybe you would like to see or your questions. Some funeral homes do offer tours, and depending on what type of tour, you can see a lot in that capacity. Also, if you need any resources at all, I'm on LinkedIn, I live there. Feel free. I've made a lot of connections on LinkedIn. Actually, that's where I met Jen, right? Jen, we met on LinkedIn through a mutual connection. And so I would say utilize the resources, but the connections that you have, just build upon them and see where that lands. If you said, you are in your own business too, maybe collaboration with local funeral homes might also open up some opportunities for you. That's my 2 cents. So Jen, what about you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely concur. And my only thing that I would add to that, as somebody who gets asked and gets my brain picked many times, hey, can I pick your brain? And I'll have no brain left if they keep picking, is be clear on what it is that you want, right? So decide, like, be clear, sit down with yourself and go, okay, if I go to X, Y, and Z funeral homes, what do I want from them? And what can I give to them? Right? Sit down and say, what can I offer that's of value to them, and what would I like to take in return? Because everyone in this world actually does want something from people and wants to give, but we're all just unclear, and we're afraid to ask, and we're afraid to whatever. Whereas I always start with, well, what can I bring to the table? What can I give? And so, like, I do a lot of these free workshops, I do a lot of free talks, stuff like that, because you're giving then value to somebody. And then, look, depending on what you want in return, you get or you don't get. So I would be clear on what you can give and then what you would like. And that will make it a lot easier. Like, if more people came to me and said, hey, I want to pick your brain on X, that helps me decide, okay, can I afford to give this time to this person, or do I need to charge for it, or how else are we figuring it out? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Hope that helps. Okay, no worries. Thank you for the question. And I hope I'm saying this right. Jaline? My little Irish accent.
You said it right. Hi, Professor T.
Hello, Miss Richard. Welcome.
I think I just want to say thank you so much for emphasizing having people like voice their wants and their needs for how they want their funeral. I lost my mom while I was in the program, and I found my family members did not know I was in the program actually, but when my mom passed, I found it like incredibly crazy that amongst 6 kids and a husband that she had for 30 years, none of us would have given her the funeral it is that she wanted. So we have to emphasize to people that death is inevitable and that it will happen, and for them to have the last hurrah it is that they want to have, it should be voiced, it needs to be written down, and someone needs to know where it is for them to have that last hurrah. Also, in life right now, I'm a nurse, and I find it also incredibly awesome that we are tapping into the LGBTQ plus community, because they do have their community and they do have their voices, they do have their wants, and whatever it is that they want to be presented as when they do die, that's something it is that should be respected. That's something it is that they wanted, is not what we wanted for them. And if that's what will put them in peace, give it to them. It's not up to us to decide what it is that we want for them. So to be educated on what it is that they want also, hurrah to you guys. Hooray for educating us and letting us know that they are included. A lot of times they feel deserted and they feel depressed, not realizing that they don't fit into our community, but they do, and we have to also accept their community. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And please,
is there any more?
If you can send your I called it the end of life questionnaire. please.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I have a little date with my mom in a few weeks, and between her and my dad, I'd like them to settle this out so we can, have it figured out.
Let me actually put the link in the chat.
Perfect.
That I can send it to everybody, but just in case, because I know sometimes these emails get lost and things like that. And
maybe preface it, not that they're going to go anywhere anytime soon because you're in mortuary school. You're not like facilitating their demise, but but the options.
My dad has already told me, at least I know for him, he's like, listen, just burn me. And I'm like, guys, why you? Thanks. Okay.
Yeah. But, I think there's so much discussion around this topic, and I really would welcome, we could do more of these and, just thoughtful, insightful things, and again, not everyone is, wanting to become a director, but, wherever you're sitting today, there's many spaces for you to be involved in and make a difference for people.
Yeah. And Luminary are great at facilitating. I've done so many workshops now with them in person and virtually. And they've been so great in supporting this community, never mind anything else. It's a fantastic spot in New York if you get to go. And of course, it's spreading nationally and I think even internationally. But yeah, it's a great networking space and very diverse and inclusive. And I love that they let me come in and talk on my death talk. So they love the Glam Reaper at Luminary. So thanks guys for having me and having all of us.
Oh my God, thank you. We really do love you and love your program. I personally have found it super insightful as someone who all people sort of are forced to think and deal with grief a lot in different ways.
Yeah.
And it's always so resonant, and especially for our community, which sometimes can be so focused on a specific goal or outcome or entrepreneurial something. When life hits and you have to slow down and rethink priorities, I feel like programs like yours and content like y'all's is so effective and helpful. So truly, we love having you all the time. So thank you. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks.
Thank you for your questions. This was such a lovely conversation, truly. And we do have a recording that we can have shared. Yes.
Excellent. Because we want to share that with as many people. There were a few people who couldn't make it. And I just want to add, actually, when I do my Luminary talks in person, it is always hilarious because it is a networking kind of space. So it's always hilarious when I'm having the talks and somebody walks past the room or walks past and hears something that I'm saying and they're like, wait, what? And then they come in and then they love it and then they go out with some information. So yeah. So thank you everyone for coming.
Organic growth.
Yeah, that's it. And thank you so much for facilitating this, guys. And Tanya, thank you very much for joining me and being my expert.
Thank you so much. You know what? We'll have to get you at the college. We'll do an in-person with the college with your presentation, Jen.
I love a good in-person. I do.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful day.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
I know. They did.